When Peter answers the "Who is Jesus?" question on the day of Pentecost, he uses two Psalms of David, Psalms 16 and 110. Those Psalms that his hearers would have known so well apply only provisionally to David, but absolutely and completely to Jesus. When David writes them, he is writing prophetically, thinking beyond himself to the one who will fulfill in his life and death and resurrection from the dead everything that David could only promise. In Psalm 16, the psalmist is in danger. His prayer is, "Keep me safe, O God." But his response to that danger is not to compromise with idolatry, but to commit to absolute trust in God. He does this by devoting himself to what you could call armour-plated contentment. It is enough for him that his God has assigned him his portion and his cup. The psalmist doesn't need for the things that are coming his way to somehow be objectively good things, the way the world sees good. To enjoy God's presence by being in the centre of his will and to be amongst his people is joy, delight. It's God's presence he cherishes, not any particular fringe benefits that may attach to it. In fact, whatever improvements to his general state you could suggest to him right now, he would reject them for himself if they came at the cost of stepping away from full obedience to God as Lord, because apart from his Lord, he has no good thing. You can call this kind of contentment armour-plated because it stands up really well to all the attacks on our faith that come along when we're going through the tough times. If my delight is in God rather than the benefits that come from trusting him, then it's really hard for the enemy to get in amongst us with the suggestion that we could make things a lot easier on ourselves right now by temporarily only, abandoning our faith in Jesus. The key to this kind of armour-plated contentment is praise. It's praising the Lord who counsels me. This praise doesn't arise from our feelings. Praise is way too important to be left resting on such a flimsy foundation as my feelings. No, it's praise that stems from gratitude that the God who made us takes care to guide our steps from day to day and hour to hour, even during the night. Praise then is not the exclusive activity of those who have happy feelings. This psalm is written by an anointed king who's in mortal danger because he's on the run from another king, Saul. And he's determined to respond to that danger only by absolute trust in God. Now David, however, dies and is buried and stays buried, as Peter points out. Verse 10 of this psalm, and therefore the whole of the rest of the psalm, is only fully fleshed out in one person, and that's Jesus. Anointed and unrecognised, constantly in danger, absolutely obedient even to death, and finally vindicated. Who is Jesus? He is the one who has only one way of dealing with the dangers that we face, and that is to empty himself totally into the will of the Father, because it is the will of the Father. More than that, says Peter, he is the one to whom the Lord says, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet." Now that's from Psalm 110. And it's always been a psalm full of great news for the kinds of God-fearing Jews who are listening to Peter on the day of Pentecost. God's kingdom spreading out behind enemy lines, a springing up of a new people almost from nowhere, an eternal priest put in place by God, and in the end a very final judgment for those enemies. That's always been a psalm full of delightful promise for these people, the kind that you quote to yourself for reassurance in your lonely exile among the peoples of the world away from the promised land. But now Peter preaches that it's about Jesus whom you crucified. No wonder they are cut to the heart and cry out, "Brothers, what shall we do?" It turns out that they are God's enemies. And who is Jesus? He is the judge of all the earth, whose enemies will become a footstool for his feet. If you have been, as Peter did not finish by saying, thank you for listening.